Reverend L. Sharpton, welcome to the Daily Social Distancing Show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be with you, Trevor.
Let's jump straight into it. Your new book is entitled Rise Up, Confronting a Country at a Crossroads. And you write in this book that America has two choices, basically. Either America continues being a progressive country that moves to make people's lives better and tries to better itself, or it goes back to a time when all that mattered was the color of your skin and how much money you had. Do you really think that the choice is that stark, and what do you think that means for America?
I think the choices are that stark. In the last half century, we had in incremental steps at times and leaps at other times started moving toward a more inclusive society in terms of voting rights, in terms of the rights of ending some of the economic barriers, in terms of gender equality, in terms of LGBTQ rights, all across the board, and in terms of dealing with climate change. And I deal with all of it in the book. And then all of a sudden, after 8 years of Barack Obama as president, there was this backlash, almost like after Reconstruction in the 19th century in this country. And that backlash was personified by Donald Trump. So what I go through in the book is my journey. I started as an activist when I was 13 years old. In my journey, I've seen that upward tilt fighting all the way up to ultimately seeing a Nelson Mandela walk out of jail to a Barack Obama becoming president. And then I see this challenge where Donald Trump won on denying that Barack Obama was a real American. He's not one of us. Right. And governing in that way. And I'm saying we're at a crossroads. We've got to decide, are we going to continue the trek that the Dr. Kings and the Mandelas all the way to my generation and the generation behind me were headed, or are we going to let this aborted route take us another way? And ironically, it couldn't have been more plain than in last night's debate, where right. You have a president refusing to denounce white supremacy, even saying when he says, well, who are you talking about? And the Fox News anchor, who's the moderator, says, the Proud Boys, he says, stand back, stand by. Well, I don't say stand by, I say rise up. That's the name of the book.
Let's talk about rising up. 2020 has seen a slew of protests like never before, I would think, in the United States. Now, you are the one person who could almost say that definitively because you have been part of the movements in this country from the very beginning in terms of, marching for civil rights, in terms of getting out there and fighting for equal rights. When young people are out there fighting for freedom, there is a constant battle between, how the protest should be managed, what the protest should be. Now, you were part of a movement that was nonviolent, but at the time was still considered to be one of the most agitative protests around. It's not like people were hugging you for doing what you were doing. What advice would you give to the young generation today who are trying to start another type of protest in how they manage how the protest is seen and what the outcomes of that protest should actually be?
I tell them, because I'm still out there protesting with them and leading. We just had probably the biggest march in Washington a few weeks ago of the year. And I say to them, first of all, there's nothing new going on in these tensions, because when I was young, we used to challenge the older way of doing things. Don't forget that Dr. King was challenged by those in the Black Power movement. You had Dr. King and Malcolm at the same time, and there were tactical disagreements. So let's not act like this is new. When people start talking like that, I say, oh, you just haven't studied. We've always had that. And what I say to them is you must set the goal. What are we trying to achieve? And the tactics must complement the achievement of the goal. If you are trying to get the courts and the criminal justice system to give justice to a George Floyd or a Breonna Taylor or Ahmaud Arbery or whoever we are fighting for now, how I behave, what I do to raise attention and put focus on that, am I doing it in a way that will lead a jury to seeing that this was a peaceful, law-abiding person? Or am I acting in a way that a jury would believe, oh, well, they're out there wild and reckless. Maybe the victim was that way and the police had no choice. You have to correspond. If you don't have the moral conviction, I have the nonviolence. Explain to me the tactic of if we I was in Minneapolis leading one of the vigils. Explain to me why, if we go over and burn that store down, that's going to get the police indicted. You don't have to have my moral code. Explain to me the tactic of that. If we are just venting our anger, and nobody's more angry than me, I've been doing this for 40 years, but if we're just venting our anger, are we really exploiting the use of the victim to vent how we feel, or are we really trying to change what we're angry about? That's what I tell them, and that's what I challenge them on.
You've been part of the biggest movements that have helped to shape America today. What do you think the next 40 years is meant to be? What do you think the next fight should be?
I think the next fight must be, first, we have to preserve what was established for voting rights, the rights of people to have economic opportunity, educational opportunity, and the rights across the board, gender equality, LGBTQ, and climate change. And then we must build on that so that we equalize society, where we don't have a society with the top 1% owning everything, they exploiting the waters and the air. We need to build and hold what we have and then go forward. Otherwise, we're going to be in a contaminated planet that we cannot inhabit. And we're also going to have an inequality that the very fabrics of society is going to divide. And I think the next 40 years, I see for the first time, a lot of people, young people, even in my own organization, National Action Network, black and white. I see more whites than I've ever seen that are out there that gives me hope that we can go to the next step, because it's not going to take any singular silo. We're going to have to learn how to intersect. And that's what I write in the book about. That's why I talk about more than just black issues. Right. If we don't have an intersectional movement, we cannot fight the powerful forces that we face.
Reverend L. Sharpton, thank you so much again for joining us on the show.
Bless you, Trevor. Always glad to be with you.